then is the Great Commission actually calling us to do? Is it to make disciples of all nations, to disciple all nations? And whatever phrase you choose, what exactly does that mean? Would also note that not only Doug Wilson and Rich Lusk and those of the Reformed, postmillennial, theonomist, dominionist camps, but also over a very different end of the spectrum within Protestantism, in charismatic circles, Lord Cunningham and Lance Wallnau write books that promote, that say disciple all nations means disciple India, disciple Tajikistan, disciple America and Mexico, and that means transform them at the societal level through and through. Now, I don't agree with that position. I don't think that's what the Great Commission is saying, but in this video, I want to say two things favorable, that the two things that I think are most favorable to that position. First one is grammar. I think that the best a literal translation of the Greek is disciple all nations. I think it's a fine literal translation. The Greek is methetusete. Forgive my horrible Greek pronunciation, but that's a transitive verb saying cause them to be disciples with a direct object in the accusative case, pataetaithne. So a literal translation of that is disciple all the nations. That's why Young's literal translation, which is seeking to be as literal as possible, still be understandable English, takes the aorist participle. It's not an indicative saying go. It's having gone, then disciple all the nations. So I would be in favor of more translations, those on the formal equivalence end of the spectrum, saying disciple all nations, because I think that captures the Greek grammar. Now, what does it mean to disciple all the nations? And I don't think it means what the post-millennialists and Christian nation builders say it means. So interpretation is another issue. But just as far as translation, especially at the literal level, and formal equivalence is often helpful to have a literal translation. I'm cool with. I prefer disciple all the nations for a literal translation. So that's one pro. And then in terms of historic commentary and historic practice, the idea of discipling nations en masse, transforming society, at the top level has plenty of precedent. Doug Wilson and Lance Waldo didn't make this up in our current generation. Here's Matthew Henry, a very popular and influential, highly regarded by a lot of folks, commentary, and he says he's translating this phrase and says, "Admit them as disciples." And in his commentary says, "Do your utmost to make the nations Christian nations." Now he's got a paragraph here, and what he thinks he means by that. He doesn't unpack it as to the level of detail that might satisfy all of our curiosities as far as what he thinks it means to make the nations Christian nations. But certainly, even I don't feel the need to do an extensive. It'd be interesting to do. I may do it in the future. Somebody may have done it. An extensive survey of the commentaries on how that phrase has been interpreted throughout history. What does it mean to disciple the nations? But I'm willing to grant, even though the position I disagree with, I'm willing to grant that they have historical precedence, because whatever may have appeared in the commentators and the theologians, certainly all the way from the Christianization of the Roman Empire, Constantine and Theodosius in the 4th century onward, or look at Armenia and Georgia that were Christianized before that, the Holy Roman Empire, the Magisterial Reformation, the Protestants took up the banner as well. Calvin in Zurich, Luther with the German nobles, the way the British Empire operated. It's throughout history, the Christianization of society, Christianization of culture, has been a common practice. So whether people would have supported it through Matthew 28 or not, the Great Commission, I'm not sure to what extent that has historical backing or not, be an interesting story. But I'm willing to grant that the position of transforming society as the mission of the church is what the church has spent a lot of her bulk of her effort on throughout history, at least the Western Church. Again, the Nestorian Church of the East for 1,000 years was very different. But the Western Church, including Eastern Orthodox, I include that in the Western Church, in contrast to the Church of the East. So that position has those two things in its favor.